She was sitting alone on the far end of the bench, her knees pulled to her chest, eyes red like she'd been crying for hours, but hadn't allowed herself the release. The park was nearly empty, dusk settling in with that gray-blue quiet that made every sound feel heavier. I'd seen her around town before, at the grocery store, or walking near the old bookstore, but never like this. Never like she had just lost her place in the world. I slowed down, unsure if I should stop or keep walking. Something in the way she held herself, so still and small, made me pause. Then she spoke, without looking up, like the words had been waiting too long to stay quiet. "My dad kicked me out because of a lie my sister told," she said, just like that, like it was a sentence she'd rehearsed so many times it no longer needed context. I sat down, not too close, just enough to let her know someone had heard her. "Stay here," I said. "I don't deserve you." She turned her face slightly toward me. The street lamp above caught the tear on her cheek before she could wipe it. There was no reply, just the sharp, uneven breathing of someone trying to hold in more than they should have to. "I'm Daniel," I added. I didn't stretch out a hand, didn't smile, just said my name like it was something steady to hold on to. "Emma," she whispered. For a while, we just sat. The quiet wasn't awkward. It was the kind that fills space when nothing else feels safe enough to say. She glanced at me once, maybe to check if I was still real, then looked away. "You don't have to tell me what happened," I said. Emma nodded. "Barely." "I wasn't going to," she replied, and for the first time, there was something almost like strength in her voice, not defiance, just a kind of tired honesty. The air was getting colder. I could see her arms tightening around herself, her thin jacket doing nothing to help. I stood up slowly. "I live 2 blocks from here," I said. "There's a couch. You don't have to talk, just somewhere warm." She hesitated, long enough for me to wonder if I'd spoken too soon, too direct. But then she stood up too, not looking at me, not saying anything, just walking, and I walked beside her. We didn't speak on the way. The rhythm of our steps did the talking, hers lighter, rushed, mine slower, steady. At my door, she paused again. I unlocked it and pushed it open. "You can leave whenever you want," I said. She stepped inside. The house was quiet, dim light, books on the shelves, the faint smell of coffee and rain in the air. I pointed to the couch and went to the kitchen. No fuss, no questions. A few minutes later, I came back with a mug of hot tea and a folded sweatshirt. "It's not much," I said, placing them on the table. Emma was curled up, eyes closed, the tension in her face finally beginning to soften. She wasn't asleep, not really, just somewhere between here and where she came from. I didn't sit. I didn't stay long. I just turned off the light, leaving a lamp on in the corner. As I walked toward my room, I heard her voice, small, almost broken. "Thank you," and I answered, just loud enough for her to hear. "You're safe." The night was silent in the way only small towns know how to be. No traffic, no sirens, just the occasional creak of wood settling and the soft hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. I didn't sleep right away. Something about having another person in the house, someone so clearly in pain, made the air feel heavier, like the walls were holding their breath. I sat on the edge of my bed, the door open just a crack. I could see the corner of the living room, the outline of Emma curled on the couch, wrapped in the blanket I'd left folded over the armrest. I had laid out an old sweatshirt and a pair of sweatpants in case she wanted to change. She had chosen the sweatshirt, I noted. It looked too big on her, which somehow made her seem even smaller. I hadn't asked for her story. Still didn't want to. People talk when they're ready, and forcing it only breaks what little trust might be forming. I got under the covers, let my eyes adjust to the dark, and listened for any signs of restlessness from the other room. It came a little after midnight, a muffled noise, like a breath caught too sharp, then the soft patter of feet on the hallway floor. I sat up. "Emma." No answer at first. Then her voice, fragile, almost embarrassed. I can't sleep." I got up, walked out slowly. She was standing near the doorway, holding the edge of the sweatshirt sleeve between her fingers, like she didn't know what to do with her hands. Her eyes were wide, not from fear exactly, but from something raw. Disorientation, maybe. The way someone looks when they're not sure what's real anymore. "Want to sit?" I asked. She nodded. We didn't go back to the couch. We sat on the floor, backs against the wall. I brought a pillow for her and a folded blanket just in case. The silence returned, but this time it wasn't empty. It had weight, meaning, "I keep thinking they'll call," she said after a while. "That he'll say it was all a mistake." I didn't say what came to mind first, that people don't always undo what they've done, and sometimes the call never comes. Instead, I said, "Do you want that?" She didn't answer, just stared at the floor, biting the inside of her cheek. After a while, her breathing slowed. Her shoulder brushed mine, unintentionally. I didn't move. "I don't want to be a burden," she whispered. "You're not," I said, without needing to think. Emma leaned her head back against the wall, closing her eyes. Why are you being kind to me? I looked at her, the faint outline of her face in the dim light. She wasn't looking for pity, just clarity, some solid ground to stand on. Because you needed someone to be, I said. That's enough. She didn't speak again. Eventually, her head tilted to the side, resting lightly against my shoulder. I stayed still. Her breathing evened out. When I was sure she was asleep, I carefully stood, lifted her gently, and brought her back to the couch. She stirred, barely, but didn't wake. I tucked the blanket around her and turned off the hallway light. Back in my room, I sat for a long time before lying down again. This wasn't what I had planned for, but something about the quiet way she had let herself be vulnerable, without asking for it, made it impossible to look away. Some people arrive in your life like a storm. Emma arrived like a question. I woke to the scent of something warm, faintly toasted bread and the sharper edge of black coffee. For a moment, I thought I'd dreamed the night before, that the girl on the couch had been a flicker of imagination conjured by loneliness and a too quiet evening. But then I heard the soft clink of a mug being set down, and it all came back. Her voice on the bench, her eyes not quite meeting mine, her head resting, briefly, on my shoulder. I walked into the kitchen barefoot, the floor cool beneath me. Emma was standing at the counter, turning a spoon slowly in a cup. She had her back to me, but something in the way she stood, rigid, uncertain, made it clear she didn't feel like she belonged there yet. The sweatshirt hung from her like it didn't know her shape. I usually make oatmeal, I said, but sometimes the toaster surprises me and actually works. She turned, startled, then offered a small smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I didn't want to wake you, she said. You had coffee, so. You found the good stuff. I nodded. You've already proven you belong here. She didn't reply. Just took a cautious sip from the mug and leaned against the counter. The silence between us stretched again, but it wasn't the awkward kind, just careful, like we were both trying not to step on something fragile. I started making scrambled eggs. Simple, quiet movements. No rush. Emma sat at the small kitchen table, hands wrapped around the mug, her eyes following the patterns in the wood grain like they might tell her what to do next. I told him the truth, she said suddenly, her voice low. But she cried. She's good at crying. I kept stirring the eggs. I didn't interrupt. He didn't even ask. She continued. Just yelled. Told me to leave until I was ready to be honest. I was already being honest. I slid the eggs onto 2 plates, added a piece of toast to eat, set one in front of her, gently, then sat down across from her. You don't have to prove anything, I said. She looked up, and for a second, I thought she might cry again, but she didn't. She nodded once, swallowed hard, and took a bite of the toast. We ate in near silence. No small talk, just the occasional clink of cutlery and the hum of the refrigerator in the background, but something in the quiet felt steady, like the absence of noise was a choice we both respected. After breakfast, I gathered the plates and rinsed them in the sink. When I turned back around, Emma was standing, unsure. I don't know how long I'll need to stay, she said. As long as you need, I replied. She hesitated, then asked, and if I don't know what I need yet? I met her gaze. Then we figure it out slowly. Emma nodded again, more certain this time. She walked back toward the living room, her steps a little less hesitant. The sun had started to rise higher, casting long beams of light across the wooden floor. She stood for a moment in that light, then disappeared into the hallway. I finished washing the last plate and dried my hands on the towel hanging by the sink. Something was shifting. Not loud, not sudden, but unmistakable, and I wasn't in a hurry. By the second morning, she was still there. I hadn't expected her to be gone, exactly, but part of me had wondered if she'd slip out before sunrise, leave a folded blanket and a thank you scribbled on a napkin. Some people vanish without noise, convinced their presence was always temporary. But Emma hadn't. She was sitting on the back step when I came into the kitchen, the screen door barely shut behind her. She was drinking tea this time, one of the herbal ones I never touched. Her hair was tied up, messily, and the sweatshirt sleeves were still rolled over her hands. The air was crisp, early autumn cold, the kind that smelled faintly of damp leaves in the coming shift. I pushed the door open gently and stepped out onto the porch beside her. She didn't flinch. That felt like something. Couldn't sleep? I asked. She shook her head. Didn't want to. I sat on the step below her, close enough to be there, far enough not to intrude. You ever feel like if you stop moving, you'll start remembering? She asked after a while. I nodded. Yeah, but sometimes stopping is the only way to start healing. She didn't answer, just pulled her knees up and rested her chin on them, her eyes watching something far off that I couldn't see. That day moved slowly, the way healing days often do. She helped me stack books in the small room I used as an office, mostly in silence. We moved side by side, the occasional glance exchanged when hands brushed or a book slipped. At lunch, I made grilled cheese. Simple. She added sliced tomatoes without asking, like she was slowly testing what she could bring into the space. I didn't say anything, just ate. In the afternoon, she asked if she could do laundry. I pointed her to the washer and gave her the detergent without offering to help. She seemed to want the task. To move, to fold, to have purpose. I understood that. Around 5 I found her on the living room floor, sitting cross-legged in front of the coffee table, flipping through an old photo album I hadn't looked at in years. She paused at a picture of my mother and me. I was younger, awkward, smiling the way you do when someone tells you to smile, and you're not sure how. She looks kind, Emma said. She was, I replied. She glanced at me. Was. I nodded. She passed a while back. Emma closed the album gently. You live here alone? I do. She didn't ask why. I was grateful. That evening, we sat in the quiet again. No TV. Just the soft buzz of a lamp and the occasional creak of the house settling. She was reading a book she'd pulled from the shelf, legs tucked under her, hair falling into her face. I watched the way she read, eyes focused, lips slightly parted. It struck me how little I knew about her and yet how easily her presence had woven itself into the rhythm of the house. As the night deepened, she stood up and stretched, then looked at me like she was weighing something unspoken. Can I stay another night? You don't have to ask, I said. She smiled then, a real one, small, tired. I'm not used to people staying, she murmured. Maybe it's time you were. She turned off the lamp and disappeared into the guest room without another word. I sat a while longer in the dark, listening to the silence shift around me. Sometimes, staying isn't a decision. It's a quiet agreement between two people who don't say much, but mean everything. By the third day, the edges of her presence began to soften into the space. She started folding the blanket on the couch each morning, precisely, like it mattered. She rinsed her mug and placed it in the same corner of the drying rack. She moved quietly, not out of fear, but caution, the kind that comes from learning not to be in the way. I didn't question it. I let the rhythm of her settling unfold naturally. Late in the morning, I found her standing in front of the bookshelf in the hallway. It was one of those tall, narrow ones, uneven with years of books added and never rearranged. She was trailing her fingers along the spine, not reading titles, just touching, like memory lived in texture. You can take any of those, I said from the doorway. She glanced over, then turned back to the shelf. I used to read all the time, she murmured. Then I stopped. I don't know when. Start again, I said. She pulled out a thin paperback, one with a cracked spine and a dog-eared cover. She looked at it like it was something fragile she wasn't sure she had permission to hold. Later, I caught her on the porch, knees pulled up, the book open on her lap. She wasn't reading quickly, just letting each page unfold at its own pace. That afternoon it rained. It wasn't a dramatic storm, just a steady drizzle, the kind that makes the world quiet. I made soup. She sat at the table, still reading. No conversation, no pressure. Only the sound of the spoon stirring and the occasional turn of a page. When I placed the bowl in front of her, she looked up. You don't talk much, she said. Not when silence is doing fine, I replied. She smiled faintly. I like that. We ate in sync. No phones, no interruptions, just two people sharing a table and whatever unspoken understanding had started to bloom between us. As the sky darkened, she asked if she could help wash the dishes. I handed her a towel, and we worked side by side. The silence between us had shifted. It wasn't empty, it was full of small, invisible threads tying the moment together. Later, as I read on the couch, she sat across from me, feet tucked beneath her, the book still in her hands. She wasn't reading, just holding it, thinking. I don't think I ever felt safe in my house, she said suddenly. I looked up. I used to think safety meant locked doors and clean kitchens, she continued. But I think it's this. Quiet. Someone being near without needing anything from you. I didn't answer right away. Then I said, everyone deserves that. She nodded, slowly. Even if they've made mistakes. Especially then. She didn't say more, but her shoulders relaxed. Her breathing evened. Something inside her, I think, settled, just a little. When she went to bed that night, she left the book on the coffee table, face down, mid-chapter, like she planned to come back, and I knew she would. It was still early when I had to step out. The sky had that pale gray cast that never quite promised rain but never ruled it out either. Emma was still asleep, or at least behind the closed door of the guest room. I didn't want to knock. Some mornings were better left untouched. I scribbled a note and left it on the kitchen counter next to the kettle. Had to run out for a bit. Tea's ready to boil. If it rains, umbrellas behind the door. D. I wasn't sure why I signed it. She knew it was from me. Maybe I just wanted her to see something with her name on it. Something simple and steady and not asking anything from her. The errand was forgettable. Groceries. Some tools I'd needed for weeks but hadn't bothered to get. I moved slowly through the store, aware of my own distraction. It wasn't worry exactly, but something adjacent to it. A quiet pull back to the house. To her. It started raining halfway home. Light, misty, but enough to darken the pavement and lift the smell of wet earth. By the time I reached the front steps, the umbrella was gone from behind the door. Inside, the kitchen light was on. The kettle had been used. Her cup sat rinsed beside the sink. She wasn't in the living room, but the book she'd left days ago was now open, pages bent backward like she'd finally committed to finishing it. I found her on the back porch. She had the umbrella open, resting against her shoulder. Though the rain had lightened to barely a drizzle, she wasn't hiding from it, just observing. The garden was quiet. The world felt paused. "You left a note," she said without turning. "Didn't want you to wonder." She nodded. It felt like something people do when they care if you're okay. I sat on the step below hers, close enough to hear her without asking her to repeat herself. "I used to hate umbrellas," she said. "They made me feel weak, like I couldn't handle a little rain. And now," she looked down at it, "now it feels like something gentle. Like I'm allowed to protect myself without having to explain why." We sat there in the soft rhythm of the drizzle, the umbrella above us both now. I hadn't noticed when she moved it to cover me too. "Do you miss anyone?" she asked suddenly. I thought about it. Sometimes, but not in the way I used to. Grief gets quieter, but not smaller. No, not smaller. The umbrella shifted slightly in her hands. She didn't meet my eyes, but she didn't need to. The silence between us said enough. When the rain finally stopped, she stood and handed me the umbrella. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For not asking me to be okay." I took the umbrella but didn't open it again. "I'll be inside," I said, "if you need anything." "Or nothing." She nodded, and I left the porch, hearing her footsteps behind me a few seconds later. Sometimes, it's the small thing, a note, an umbrella, a shared silence, that make people stay, and stay for good. I cooked more than usual, not out of ceremony, just out of instinct. The kitchen had always been a quiet kind of comfort to me, and tonight, I needed that rhythm, the sound of chopping, the warmth of the oven, the smell of garlic and olive oil filling the corners of the house. Emma was in the living room, curled on the armchair with her knees tucked close. She didn't ask what I was making. She didn't offer to help. But I noticed the way her eyes flicked toward the kitchen, like the scent was a thread pulling her back into the... I made pasta. Simple. Tomatoes. Basil. The kind of sauce you don't have to talk over. I set the table without thinking. 2 plates. 2 glasses. Nothing elaborate. Just enough to make the evening feel like it mattered. When I finally called her over, she came without hesitation. That was new. She sat across from me, arms relaxed, hair a little damp from the shower she'd taken earlier. She looked softer somehow, less braced for impact. "This smells incredible," she said. "It might be," I replied. "No promises." She smiled, small and real. We ate slowly. The conversation was quiet, scattered between bites. She asked about a photo on the wall, the one of my father fishing at the lake when I was 10. I told her the story, how he always let me think I caught the biggest one, even when I clearly hadn't. "He sounds kind," she said. "He had his moments," I said. "But yeah, he stayed when it mattered." Emma nodded, her gaze dropping to her plate. "That's rare." "Doesn't have to be," I said. We finished eating, and she insisted on doing the dishes. I let her. I stood nearby, drying as she washed. There was something quietly intimate in the way we passed plates back and forth. No rush, no awkwardness. Just 2 people who had fallen into step without trying. Afterward, we sat back at the table, each with a mug of tea. The air felt different, not charged, not heavy, just full, like the house had shifted slightly to make room for something it hadn't held in a long time. Emma looked down at her hands, fingers tracing the rim of the mug. "I keep waiting for this to stop feeling okay," she said. I didn't interrupt. "But it doesn't," she continued. "It's not loud, not exciting, just calm." "That's the idea," I said. She looked up then, and for a long moment, she didn't look away. I didn't know I could feel safe like this. I held her gaze. "You can." The silence after that wasn't empty. It carried everything we didn't say out loud. Eventually, she stood, collected her mug, walked toward the hallway. At the door to her room, she paused and turned back. "Thank you for dinner. Any time." She smiled, not because she felt she had to, but because something inside her wanted to. When the door closed behind her, the house stayed warm. Some nights, everything changes without needing to announce itself. She got the message in the morning. I noticed the shift before she even spoke. A pause at the doorway, her phone clutched tighter than usual. The kind of stillness that makes everything else in the room quieter. I didn't ask. I just waited. "He wants to talk," she said eventually. "My dad." I set down the dish towel. "What did he say?" "Just that. That he wants to talk. Said he made a mistake. That he didn't know the full story." I nodded. "Do you want to go?" "I don't know." That silence between us wasn't tense. It was searching. I saw the way her eyes moved. Not afraid, exactly, but wary. Like someone who's been burned and keeps checking for smoke. "You don't owe anyone forgiveness just because they ask for it," I said. "I know," she replied. "But I also don't want to carry this weight forever." "Then go," I said. "If it feels right, but not because you think it's your job to make things easier for— She didn't speak for a moment. Then she sat down at the table, her fingers tapping lightly on— I keep waiting for someone to tell me what I'm supposed to do, she said. But no one can— I hate how that feels. Welcome to adulthood, I said quietly. It's mostly just guessing. She laughed, not a loud laugh, but a real one. She left around noon, wore her own clothes again, tied her hair back like she needed armor. Before she stepped out, she turned to me. Do you think it's stupid to hope people change? No, I said. I think it's brave. She nodded. Will you be here when I get back? I wasn't planning on going anywhere. She held my gaze a moment longer, then she left. The house felt different without her. Not empty, just paused. Like the music had stopped, but the air still remembered the melody. I kept busy. Fixed the broken cabinet hinge in the kitchen, watered the plants, answered emails I'd ignored for days. But the hours stretched longer than they should have. She came back just after sunset. I heard the door open, slow and cautious. I stood from the couch, unsure of what face I'd see. She walked in quietly, set her keys on the counter, and looked at me. I'm not going back, she said. I nodded. He cried, apologized, but there was still this condition in his voice. Like I had to prove I was worth believing this time. I didn't speak, just waited. I told him I'm not coming home, she said. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was running away. It felt like I was choosing something. Then she looked around the room, at the walls, the books, the half-drunk cup of tea still sitting on the table. Can I stay? She asked. I didn't answer right away. I walked over, picked up her tea, poured it fresh, placed it back on the table, then looked her in the eyes. You never stopped staying, I said. She exhaled, deep, quiet, like she'd been holding that breath since the morning. That night, we didn't talk much. We didn't need to. Some goodbyes are really beginnings, disguised in the language of leaving. It was quiet the next morning, not the heavy kind we'd known before, but a lighter quiet, like the house had finally exhaled. Emma moved differently, not like a guest, not like someone trying to earn her place. She moved like the space knew her, and she knew it back. Her mug on the counter, her sweater on the arm of the chair, the folded book left near the window, small claims of presence that didn't need permission. We didn't talk much about her father after that. I think she needed silence more than analysis, and I knew better than to fill space just because it was there. That afternoon, we sat on the back porch again. The sun was warm, filtered through the trees. She had a notebook open on her lap, pen in hand, though she wasn't writing. You ever feel like you're in between things? She asked. I looked at her. All the time. I'm not running anymore, she said, but I haven't fully arrived either. Like I'm standing at a door I already walked through. You don't have to rush in. She nodded, chewing on the end of the pen. Sometimes I think I'm still waiting for someone to tell me it's okay to stay. You don't need my permission. I know, she said, then paused. But yours means something. We sat there for a while. The wind moved the leaves. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked, then went quiet again. I used to think I had to earn being chosen, she said, almost to herself. Be easier to love, quieter, less complicated. I didn't respond right away. Then I said, you don't have to be any less than who you are. Not here. She turned to look at me, eyes steady. And what if who I am is still figuring it out? Then I'll be here while you do. That evening, we cooked together. Nothing fancy. Just roasted vegetables, bread, and a little rice. She moved around the kitchen with quiet confidence, bumping into me with an apologetic smile. We shared the work without roles, without one leading and the other following. After dinner, we sat on the living room floor, leaning back against the couch. She rested her head against the cushion, looking up at the ceiling. I used to be afraid of stillness, she said. It felt like something bad would always follow it. And now, it still scares me, she admitted. But less. She turned her head toward me. Do you ever think this us was supposed to happen? I met her gaze. I don't know if anything is supposed to, but I know I would have chosen it anyway. Something in her expression softened. She didn't smile. Not exactly, but there was peace in her face, like she was no longer waiting to be let in. I think I'm starting to believe that, she said, and we sat there. Two people not pretending anymore, not chasing, not proving, just staying. The house had adjusted to her, or maybe we both had adjusted to each other, without really meaning to. I noticed it in the smallest thing, the second toothbrush in the holder, the extra pair of shoes by the door, the grocery list now written in two different handwritings. Emma had been here nearly a month. There was no agreement, no plan, but she hadn't left, and I hadn't asked her to. One morning, I walked into the kitchen to find her standing barefoot in front of the stove, flipping pancakes. My old sweatshirt hung off one shoulder. The sun lit her hair in a way that made her look like something half-remembered from a dream. You're cooking, I said, still half asleep. I felt like doing something good, she replied. We ate in quiet, the kind we'd become fluent in. Between bites, she reached for the syrup and knocked over her cup of tea. It spilled across the table and onto the floor. Damn it, she muttered, grabbing a towel, but I just laughed. It's just tea. She stared at me, towel in hand, then slowly smiled. I used to cry over things like that, she said. You still can, but I'm not going to let a cup of tea ruin your morning. She knelt down to wipe it up, and I joined her. Both of us crouched awkwardly by the table, laughing like it mattered. Maybe it did. Later, we walked into town. She reached for my hand without looking, and I took it. It wasn't a declaration. It wasn't about anyone seeing us. It was just what felt right. We passed the bookstore. She stopped, staring at the window display for a long time. I always wanted to work in a place like this, she said. Then maybe you should. She looked at me like I'd just offered her the moon. You think they'd hire me? I think if you walked in and told them you love stories, someone would listen. She didn't go in. Not that day. But the next morning, the bookstore's bell rang as she stepped through their door, alone. When she came back that evening, her smile answered every question I hadn't asked. They said I can start next week, she said. Just a few hours. But it's something. It's more than something, I told her. That night, as we sat on the couch, her head resting lightly on my shoulder, she said, I used to think love was a grand gesture, some kind of rescue. And now I think it's this. This? She nodded. 2 mugs on the counter. Your book next to mine. Knowing I can be quiet and still belong. Didn't speak. I just ran my thumb slowly along her knuckles, and she closed her eyes. We never said we were in love, but the house knew. The air between us knew. Some beginnings don't arrive with a knock. They come in with the quiet and never leave.